absolute sovereign successor of all earth, King of kings, by the grace of God, Supreme Creator, Supreme Creator, A is my soul, and my spirit, as a matter of my consciousness, and I am the Son of the Supreme God, by the Supreme Creator, of the Supreme Creator ROD, being with the soul in human body, by the grace of God, being the absolute sovereign, King of kings, and the great Prince of the earth, on the right of the heritage from Supreme God, of God Creator, Creator RA, being initially in all embodiments freeborn, by the grace of God, being the great intendant and great treasurer of the sovereign military hospital order of Saint John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes and Malta, who doesn't answer to Venetian nobility and Roman princes, family Principe Charlemagne, by the grace of God, being the owner and the supreme manager of the financial system of the world, having the transfer power, codification in the world financial system, monetary one, short code, M1, endowed with the power by the grace of God to own and manage mother accounts of the World Bank, planet Earth in the code UN classification, code M0. By the grace of God, I make a confession. Deeds and acts of the Pan-Orthodox, of the heads and representatives of the autocephalous Orthodox churches held in 1948 in honor of the 300th anniversary of the actual independence of the Russian Church and the resumption of Church in Child of God 1448 from 1943, which decided on the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church since 1943 about the proclamation in Moscow of the title of Ecumenical Patriarchate of the Church of the Childs of God, which is not under jurisdiction of Roman law and Roman pontiff, and the Childs of God are not recognized as Childs of the Lord, that the patriarchal throne in Constantinople has been occupied by Uniate Patriarchs since 1439, that the Pan-Orthodox Conference has announced a lysistrical communion with the World Council of Churches as an ecumenical organization and its members, and has recognized the decrees as formations and innovations and all statuses, declarations, resolutions, laws, decrees, descripts, orders, statements, dispensations declared by the World Council of Churches, letters, notes, deeds, warrants, and or any other instruments, as well as its statuses, property rights and other rights and dignity will not have force and enforcement, are invalid in relation to the Childs of God as men and women, dead and living, on the basis that the Scottish Constitution of 1578 was adopted in honor of Satan, as Sephiros, light and Kabbalah, meaning the lesser God. The doctrine of Germain Shindray as an official motto formed Freemasonry in Scotland, York and London through the Jesuits under the ancient symbol of the Sadducees, G as Sabbatans, followers of the Pater Zevi, Professor Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem Temple, York and Lancaster, in the Inner and Middle Temple, is the capital of the religious trust, existing since 1604 as the Protestant Church of Scotland, 1578, and I also confirmed that in 1948 the Pan-Orthodox Conference of the heads and representatives of the autocephalous Orthodox churches additionally confirmed the passing status of the Childs of God from church law to civil war, as the freeborn from the date of birth, who is in the world under the protection, guardianship and authority of God, the light of truth, the King of glory and the triumph of justice in infancy, adolescence, in maturity, in old age, in weakness, in illness, and reposed by the right of the Almighty Father, who is always a living man, the legal person of a lifelong right, for which the right of free choice is preserved and recognized, having the right to wear a gold ring according to Roman law, a column, tenant who has acquired the right to pass the episcopal rank as a sovereign, service and servant prince of the church, as a descendant in a direct descending line of any ally and co-workers of the sovereign, Tsar and Grand Knyaz of all Russia, Ivan the Terrible, since 1472 for allegiance accepted as a founder and beneficiary, in the USSR as a religious fund, to which income and annuities are due and subject to delivery from the Divine Trust, 1302. Testamentary and property trusts of the Roman Pontiff, whose descendants cannot be recognized as serfs, Roman slaves, chalds or individuals in need of patronage and manumission, emancipation from Roman Pontiff. From 1999 to 2026, I am obliged to make a choice and confirm the highest status in order to be recognized as alive in heaven and on earth and receive such a registration in the Book of the Living and the Dead. I also confirm that in relation to the Childs of God, the laws and provisions of Roman family law are inapplicable, prohibited, excluded and not provided for, and God the Creator in the child of God's mentor and child of God adopted by God. I also confirm that if child is translated as child or minor, then it will always indicate both God-born and God-bearing, to whom all power on earth belongs from God. I also confirm that since 1948, all the decisions of the World Council of Churches, its formations and innovations of the Protestant Church of Scotland, acts of its existence as a religious foundation Columbia, also known as British Columbia, or the District Columbia in Washington, and the state of Delaware, governing in the United States America. I also confirm that the special military political body of the USSR, successor of the Military People's Council of the USSR, is the legal representative and regent of the British throne. In its vacancies as the Protestant Church of the Scotland didn't accept and didn't agree to answer to the Sovereign Tsar and Grand Knyaz of all Russia according to its claims to the British Crown, and the special military political body of the USSR, successor Military People's Council of the USSR. According to the Russian and Soviet claims to the property and annuities of the Divine Trust of 1302, Testamentary Trust of the Roman Pontiff of 1455 and 1481, and the Property Trust of the Society of Jesus of 1540, and on Russian claims and loans granted to the Treasury of Scotland by Russian industrialists, Demidovs, and other persons, after which each newly entering the heir to the throne or regent of the birth throne is obliged to recognize himself as a guarantor of the return to the special military political body of the USSR, successor Military People's Council of the USSR. I also confirm that in connection with the renewal of the statute of the Church of the Childs of God and the proclamation of the title of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of the Church of Childs of God in Moscow, the head of the Anglican Episcopal Church, the New Jerusalem Temple London, 1537, and the Reserved Jerusalem Temple in the USA, 1808, recognized the rights and titles of the Child's God on earth and in the world, as the Pontiff of Rome and the Society of Jesus, in connection with the termination and validity as the Castigative Acts 1534, 1540 and 1666 on the subjects for life, repealed the British Poor Law and adopted the British National Aid Act in order to not affect rights and titles Childs of God, whose ancestors in the Scandinavian line are the sovereign Tsar and Grand Knyaz of all Russia, 1472. His companions, co-workers, subjects of the Russian Empire, Russian and Soviet citizens, now regulated by the special military political body of the USSR, successor Military People's Council USSR, British Admiralty Law and Maritime Law. I further certify that since 1948 the British National Assistance and Separate National Health Services Act for England, Ireland, Wales and Scotland has been indicated for the purposes of trade in the United Kingdom. Under the Admiralty Law and the Maritime Law, British citizenship is granted by holding a National Health Service (NHS) National Identification Number. The Parliament of the United Kingdom regulates the range of benefits provided by the National Health Service (NHS). All laws, acts of British Crown apply only to citizens of the United Kingdom, and not to the citizens of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland before 1948, which entails that the local population within the British Commonwealth, territories, directories, colonies, and plantations falling under the jurisdiction of the British Crown doesn't have civil rights. He has no or terminated citizenship, where the term citizenship means the registration of newborns as persons and personalities, not as liveborns but as non-residents, as foreigners, as stateless person, as sick and disabled persons on the territory of the central districts of the Admiralty, the borders of which coincide with the state borders of such territorial entities. The passport becomes an identity card and a pass, travel pass, for moving from one central district to another, and does not certify that its holder has human, natural, civil, and other rights, but only indicates that the passport holder is voluntary Roman slave, biological property Roman pontiff, and the living speaking poverty, cattle of the Society of Jesus. Such provision on citizenship under the applicable law is established in relation to all state entities and residents, except for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and international entities, councils, and organizations as subjects of international law of the CMEA and the Department of Internal Affairs with the participation and membership of the USSR on the grounds since 1472. By the preemptive and privileged right of the sovereign, Tsar and Grand Knyaz of all Russia over the British Crown, the Roman Pontiff, the Society of Jesus, the USSR as a religious foundation, the citizens of the USSR as childs of God, who have remained faithful to the oaths of the USSR, and their worthy descendants, in direct and descending lines, are not recognized, are not born slaves, but from the moment of birth they are alive, men and women, and subjects of life law, whose rights are subject to international certification and confirmation in international records and registers of the British Admiralty in 1899, after the annulment of titles and rights of registers existed before 1899. I further certify that the bylaws of the World Council of Churches, as the founding and innovation of the Protestant Church of Scotland, its existence as the Columbia Religious Foundation, also known as British Columbia, or the District of Columbia in Washington, and as the States of Delaware administers the United States of America as a cooperative trust under the United States commercial government, registered under the Crown Aragon in Puerto Rico, valid until 2016 and 5 years on transition to the Republic of the United States. I also confirm that after the formation of the United Nations, all statuses, laws, decrees, declarations, memorandums, descripts, orders, statements, dispensations, letters, notes, deeds, warrants or instruments, as well as the statuses, property rights, and other rights and dignity will have no force and enforcement, and are invalid in relation to human, men and women, both living and dead. I also confirm that in 1948, the special military political body of the USSR, successor the Military People's Council of the USSR, declared that the Russian Orthodox Church wouldn't be a participant and wouldn't enter into ecclesiastical communion with the World Council of Churches, but would remain an observer and overseer of him, so that rights and titles of loyal citizens of the USSR as the childs of God are unshakably respected, protected, and not diminished. And with respect to sovereigns and subjects of international law, whose sovereignties arose from the USSR and its residents, the following provisions will apply. The special military political body of the USSR, successor the Military People's Council of the USSR, is the legal representative and regent of the British throne in his vacancy. The World Council of Churches is under the authority of the Roman Curia, and from it received the right to own, use, dispose, and keep the income of annuities under the Divine Trust from 1302 and the Society of Jesus Property Trust from 1540. The S quota in world money is administered by the Imperial Trust and managed by the Richard Gravitt, and which was annulled by him in 2006. The Protestant Church didn't accept and didn't agree to answer to Sovereign, Tsar and Grand Knyaz of all Russia on his claims to the British Crown and the special military political authority of the USSR, on the Russian claims on property and annuities of the Treasury Trust of 1455 and 1481, and on Russian claims and loans granted to Scottish Treasury by Russian industrialists Demidovs and others. I also confirm that since 1948, any declaration of sovereignty, declaration of independence, and formation of state, whose continuity doesn't date back to the USSR, entails that such peoples and states, in exchange for international recognition, are subject to registration in World Banking System as trading companies and corporate trust in the state of Delaware, USA, as having been incorporated and incorporated in the United States of America since 1791, to which the provision of English Bill of Rights 1648 shall apply. After that, the resident of such trading company and corporate trust under the Roman law, as a person acquires the status of a dead man and woman, who are issued with the appropriate password and visa form. They are trophy or surviving population, prisoners of war, migrants or foreigners who are obliged to remain faithful and loyal to the authorities, the monarch or other dominion declaring a citizen as their ally, warden, debtor, or else entails the recognition of him as sick or an enemy of the state, subject to entertainment or isolation and deprivation of poverty and other civil rights, and also not having the opportunity to receive and use the income and annuities arising in Divine Trust of 1302, and also not having the right to legal protection in court. At the same time, a foreigner and a migrant may be recognized as a friendly or neutral person, receiving the right and residence permit and certain privileges and rights until he is neutralized by a citizen or stateless person, who is deprived of all rights and privileges to property, and whose rights are subject to alienation in favor of the Roman Pontiff, which de facto and de jure declared as his property all non-residents, foreigners and migrants who disagree with the fact that they are de facto Roman slaves, While it is recognized and confirmed that Roman law in relation to citizens of the USSR on the territory of the USSR, overseas possessions of the USSR and Russians prohibited, wasn't introduced, was not applied, and is not subject to application. I also confirm that since 1948, membership in the UN should be understood the existing entity, sovereign or monarch, agreed to exist as a registered trading company and corporate trust in the global banking and financial system, and join the sovereigns, the UN founders, as permanent members of the UN Security Council. I also confirm that the German Reich Trust, 1870-1943, remains unfinished and not closed, but is considered to have passed into the jurisdiction of peace treaties following the results of World War II, and all residents, trading companies, and corporate trusts formed since 1870 are payers under the New World Order Trust, 1943-2016. I also confirm that all trading companies and corporate trusts are registered as companies and subsidiary trusts within the New World Order Trust, 1943-2016, the end of which in March 2016 will indicate the onset of the last judgment of God and the end of the world. I also confirm that the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics established the following status quo for the permanent members of the UN Security Council, which is not subject to revision or change without the consent of the USSR, and which should be understood in the sense that China is the government of the Kuomintang and the Republic of China in Taiwan. As the successor of the Great Dragon, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, is a United Russian Byzantine since 1472, Russian British since 1555, and Russian Persian since 1575 throne in Moscow of the sovereign, Tsar and Grand Knязь of all Russia, his free and loyal companions, and their descendants in the direct descending line, consisting in the citizenship of the USSR as a use of God as the lawful owners of the Great Treasury Seal of the British Empire. The United Kingdom is the trading crown of the bankruptcy of the British Crown in 1815, which the USSR decided on behalf of the sovereign, Tsar and Grand Duke of all Russia, to restore in titles and rights to the sovereign crown in the Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, without the throne of Scotland, so that through it rights and the titles of the Russian Empire and the Emperor and Autocrat of all Russia in 2017 would have been duly extinguished and terminated in the exclusive favor of the USSR. The United States of America has been commercial corporate government of the United States since 1871, as a seat until the end of the New World Order Trust in 2017 of the Curia of Rome. New Venice as the territory of the Society of Jesus, after the establishment of the Republic in the form of the British Commonwealth, as New Atlantis, Reserve Temple of Jerusalem, in the United States since 1808, the Religious Foundation Columbia as British Columbia, or the District of Columbia in Washington as the State of Delaware, the seat of the Treasury and the Court of the Exchequer of Scotland, and the seat of registers and records under the UCC, the place of registration of trading companies and corporations in the world banking and financial system, when the U.S. corporate government is established in Puerto Rico under the Crown of Aragon, as fallen under the British regulations on the grounds that the USSR and the British throne as the successor of the Republic of the USA, 1776-1870. France is the place of formation in 775 of the Holy Catholic Church in Saint Denis in the Carolingia era, as the place of initiation of anti-popes and the place of adoption of the sacred law against slavery, tyranny, and the Roman cult, as the defeated war empire of Napoleon in 1812-1815, as the world state Jesuits and the king of the world, the Sanhedrin and the king of Jews, 1806, whose titles and rights are to be folded in order to their capitulation in 2013-2016 before the King of Glory. I also confirm that the interests, rights, and titles of citizens of the USSR, their descendants in a direct descending line, who have retained or taken the oath of the USSR, are inviolable in the Russian Federation and do not fall under the jurisdiction of the Roman Pontiff and the Society of Jesus. Property, rights, titles, personal property of citizens of the USSR are inviolable. Soil and natural rights are inalienable, such as the right to life, health, inviolability, honor, dignity, and reputation, equality before the law and in the courts, protection from arbitrary interference in private and family life, the right to protection by law, the presumption of innocence, the prohibition of torture, cruel, and inhuman treatment or punishment, the prohibition of being subjected to medical and scientific interventions and experiments without the consent, the right to a social order in which human rights can be fully exercised, respected, and protected. The implementation of Soviet human rights is carried out at the level of recognized international norms, excluded by discrimination based on national ethics, political, religious, gender, and age characteristics, guarantees reliable legislative protection of the personality and dignity of a citizen, the inviolability of his home and property, freedom to choose a profession, determines the place of residence, departure and entry into the country, secrecy of correspondence and telephone conversations, freedom of speech, press and information, free self-determination of a person in his worldview and spiritual interests, freedom of consciousness. I also confirm that the General Civil Passport of the USSR replaces the diplomatic passport in the Russian Federation. I also confirm that citizens of the USSR who retain the passport of the citizens of the USSR retain and fully enjoy, own and dispose of all the rights and titles of a citizen of the USSR, in the USSR and abroad, and sovereigns retain on the privileges, immunities, inviolability, and extraterritoriality through which citizens who have lost a Soviet passport and their direct descendants may acquire rights and enjoy Soviet protection and patronage. I also confirm that USSR passport holders who are in military service in the USSR or under the Military People Council of the USSR have the status of inviolable judges, auditors, overseers, and controllers of the general and officers of the Society of Jesus, monitor the activities of the Roman Curia and always the fathers of kings and princes, family Principes Romain as trustees of the Russian Democratic Federative Republic, as those who didn't fulfill the testamentary will of Richard Gravid, as overdue debtors to Jesus Christ as the King of Glory, the Shekinah of Persia, servants of God, loyal citizens of the USSR as freeborn, when the date of the beginning of the last judgment of God and the end of the world came for the debtors from March 20, 2016. Before the citizens of the USSR, individuals and Russian citizens appear and have a recognized status of legally incompetent and incapacitated persons who do not have legal rights to perform legally significant actions and put forward any demands or perform any actions in action against the citizens of the USSR and or are subject to persecution. To the International Court for Violation of the Decrees and Acts of the Nuremberg Tribunal, 1945-1946, as accomplices and established war criminals who committed international crimes against the USSR, citizens of the USSR and all humanity, is their actions in action are not aimed at recognizing, protecting, and pursuing Soviet rights and interests in the Russian Federation and around the world. By the grace of God, on the rights of heritage, being the freeborn, God-born, and God-bearing, to whom all power on earth belongs to Supreme Creator R.A., we confirm the beginning of the last judgment of God and the end of the world for everyone who does not obey the divine will and begins to ignore the call of God, because for he who gives heed and who hearkens will receive eternal life and right of further spiritual development according to the divine laws in the world of light. His Majesty, King of Kings, Alexander. Om.